There seem to be two different contradicting opinions floating around online about Kentucky, and to be honest with you, neither are true.
You are Locked On Kentucky, your daily podcast on the Kentucky Wildcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, what's going on, Big Blue Nation? Welcome on into Locked On Kentucky, your daily Kentucky Wildcats podcast. I'm your host, Lance Dawe, and on today's episode of Locked On Kentucky, we're going to be talking about two different narratives online right now about Kentucky basketball that I think both aren't true. But let's play along. Which narrative is true? Because they can't be both true at the same time. Also on today's episode, Kentucky is looking to win the game against Purdue next week, or are they really? Are they just trying to experiment? I don't necessarily think that that's a bad thing, but a lot of you guys might not like that. And in the wrap up the show, we're going to talk about maximizing possessions, something that Pope had talked a little bit about during SEC Media Days. And I kind of want to just give my take on it because it's something we have been emphasizing this offseason. And it's something that the head coach has brought up again. So I think it's going to be very important for us to understand what exactly Kentucky's trying to go for here, both on offense and defense. Thank you guys so much for making Locked On Kentucky your first listen every single day. Want to remind everyone out there that we are free and available on all platforms. If you're watching on YouTube, I would greatly appreciate it if you subscribe to the show. And if you are listening on podcast, I would also appreciate it if you subscribe there as well. All right, let's go ahead and get into it. So there's two different narratives online right now about Kentucky basketball, and I think both of them are incorrect. But first, let's get to these two narratives. The first, and this is something that has been floating around online for months now, and it hadn't been confirmed, but Lexington Herald-Leader puts out information saying, hey, Kentucky's roster is worth $22 million. $22 million. That's an insane amount. And that had kind of been floating around, the online ether for quite some time, but it had been shot down. There was no way to confirm it. There still is no way to confirm it. Whenever Pope had been talking about it, it had kind of been tongue in cheek, kind of like saying yeah, no, this is not even possible. How could you guys think this? And then Herald-Leader puts out a statement saying it's $22 million. This is how much the roster is worth. It's insane. The online response to that has been fascinating, because people are placing themselves in one of two camps over the course of the last 24 hours. You could be like Jeff Goodman, where you sit here and say, Kentucky has spent so much money on a roster that anything short of a Final Four is a failure. If Kentucky does not make a Final Four, the season will be a failure. And that is one opinion. And for all the irrationality behind the expectations of this fan base, I think that there is some sort of credit that you have to give towards, okay, you are the best program in all of college basketball. You should try, there should be some sort of attempt to uphold the standard, right? You should not be trying to shoot for middle of the pack in the SEC or just make the NCAA tournament and have fun with it. If you are the best program in all of college basketball, the goal should be to compete for a national championship every year, right? But sometimes that's not the most realistic expectation when you look at the actual context behind rosters, coaching, the surrounding conference, the surrounding landscape. And the funniest part about this is it's not like people like Jeff Goodman or other people on the internet are dropping any sort of truth nuke on the planet by saying, man, if Kentucky doesn't compete for a Final Four, this is a failure. I've got a newsflash for you guys. That's the expectation for this fan base every year, regardless of whether or not Kentucky has a dozen lottery picks waiting all the way down into the depth of their bench with players like Devin Booker, or if they've got, Devin Askew running the point and a group of unproven players, or if they've got players like, no shade to Jacob Toppin, but if they've got players like him trying to operate point guard in the back half of a season where most of your top options are hurt, Kentucky is still going to expect to win, even if the circumstances aren't that great. They throw context out the window. They throw the obvious glaring issues and weaknesses of a team out the window and say, okay, if we do not make a push in the tournament, everything is over. I think there is a little bit of irrationality too. Again, defining success solely based on whether or not you win in the tournament, whether or not you win in this single elimination format where it's virtually impossible for a lot of programs to win it, and it's very difficult for programs like Kentucky or Florida or Houston or Duke. It's very difficult for them to win the title. It's a difficult thing to do, but yet this is where we're at. So I think it's a little bit reasonable to some extent, but also at the same time, no. So that's one opinion that's floating around. Kentucky has spent too much money to fail. The other opinion that is floating around is that Kentucky has spent too much money on a bad team. Kentucky has spent too much money on a group of role players. And I ask you, what do you think most teams are comprised of? Do you think that every single national championship caliber squad is is comprised of an NBA All-Star team? What do you think? What do you think a team is? It's not a group of heliocentric all-star players. That's not how this works. That's not how it works at the NBA level, and that's not how it works here. You can get, at best, what's the term you've heard in the NBA? A big three. You can get a big three because that's what your roster will provide you. And then the rest of the roster is filled up of, that's right, role players. For some reason, there is this bizarre narrative out there that because Kentucky went and got a bunch of second options last year, that they were incapable and are now currently incapable of putting together a roster of anything more than role players. As if they are supposed to put together a roster comprised of LeBron James, Steph Curry, Kobe Bryant, Tim Duncan, and Shaquille O'Neal. And they point to say, well, they've spent all of this money. They should have LeBron. They should have Shaq. They should have Steph. You can't build a team like that. What did Florida do last year? They had one guy that was going off with Elijah Martin complimenting him. Walter Clayton was playing like a beast as the lead guy, and Elijah was playing well off of him. Guess what Kentucky has this year? They have the preseason SEC Player of the Year. Now, you and I can sit here and argue about what defines a lead guard, what defines the man when it comes to assist rate, percentage of possessions used, scoring volume, efficiency, right? We can sit here and argue about that. I'll tell you two different things, though. Kentucky last year had Otega Owe lead them in scoring. And on top of this, you want to go look at his KenPom page, the leading model for analytics in college basketball. They say that he was their top option, the number one player used. Second was Amari Williams, the number one player used. He's back with a guy in Jalen Lowe who, guess what, was used on over 29% of possessions at Pitt, was their most utilized player, led them in assist rate, was top 10 in the ACC in scoring, top 10 or top 5 in assists in the ACC, and he averaged over 16 a game. And you may not like the shooting. You may not like the efficiency. Seen a lot of goalposts moving online today with that. But Jalen was what you describe as an offensive engine at Pitt. Owe is getting there. You've got two of those guys. You've got two of them. Do you need a third and fourth and fifth? You don't. You cannot possibly run a team with a bunch of top options like that are looking to get theirs, basically. It's not possible. So for anyone out there that says, well, Kentucky's comprised, they spent too much money on a team full of role players. They're not going to be very good because they've got a bunch of role players on their team. Yeah, you idiot. That's how it works. That's how basketball works. That's how the sports work. You don't go unless you're the Los Angeles freaking Dodgers and you have millions and millions and millions and millions of money. Even then, you can't get the best player in the sport at every position. You can try, but you're not going to get it at every single position. Kentucky has an incredible roster for what they spent. With the money that they had, they put together an elite roster. Very, very good. Also, let's just talk about this real quick. You've got your incredible backcourt duo, 1-2 punch. We've talked about this already this offseason with Jaden Quaintance, the best defender in the country. That's who you spent money on. If you have any questions about what Kentucky spent money on, that's what they spent money on. They spent money on Otega Owe coming back. They spent money on some of these freshmen, and then they also spent money on JQ to make sure that he is satisfied and he is okay with the money that he's getting here. Two contradicting opinions with the narrative here online. Kentucky has spent so much money that they should win a title, and Kentucky has spent so much money on a bad team, and they won't amount to anything. And for some reason, you go and you look at these different people that are spewing these different thoughts. Quite often, it doesn't take that long to scroll. Quite often, you'll see people that are somehow holding the same opinions, holding both opinions at once, that Kentucky sucks and they won't amount to anything, and they've spent so much money that they should win a title, that this is such a good team that they should do. So which one is it? Which one is it today for Kentucky? It is so bizarre how we went this offseason from saying Kentucky is the deepest team in America to Kentucky spent too much money on a roster of role players and they won't amount to anything. What a crazy pivot. And the take is so unbelievably outdated because all these people know is two things: how to use a blanket statement to further their argument. That's one, which anybody and their mother can do. How to use a blanket statement, and then what last year's team looked like and what the narrative around last year's team looked like. This is not your 2024 Wildcats. This is different. This is much different, and it's going to be a guard-led team. It absolutely is. I want to talk a little bit more about this and talk about the exhibition game against Purdue. Oh my goodness. We'll do all of that here in just a little bit. Before we do it, though, I'll tell you guys about our friends over at Mazda. Mazda crafts cars for those who do more than simply move. They deliver confidence with every ride. They've got more IIHS Top Safety Pick Plus awards than anyone else. From footwork to breathwork, athletes sweat all the details, and Mazda brings this same intention to how they craft every single model. With all-wheel drive standard in every crossover SUV, you can drive with confidence through almost any season. Like their players, they sweat every detail because when you make every move count, impossible becomes relevant. Mazda, move and be moved. Today's episode is brought to you by Peloton. Peloton is shaping the future of fitness with the brand new Peloton Cross Training Thread Plus, powered by Peloton IQ. It's their most advanced equipment yet, designed to give you real-time guidance and endless ways to move, whether you're running, lifting, or cross-training with your favorite instructors. This is training reimagined. Peloton is built for breakthroughs with tools that help you plan, stay motivated, and reach peak performance. I love how the Peloton IQ system offers real-time strength coaching. It actually tracks your reps, adjusts the right weights, and corrects your form, making every rep safer and smarter. So let yourself run, lift, flex, and push forward. Explore the new Peloton Cross Training Thread Plus today at onepeloton.com. All right, continuing along here on today's episode of Locked On Kentucky, Lance Dawe hanging out here with you. Really appreciate you guys hanging out today. If you have not subscribed to the YouTube channel or the podcast feed, really appreciate it if you would do so. So we're talking here about Kentucky and narratives, how there are so many different contrasting opinions about this team, about how they've spent too much money, they should win a title. They've spent too much money, they're going to suck. And a lot of times you see people holding the same opinion, which I don't think is possible to do. So I'd ask you guys real quick, if one of these is true, which one is it? Which narrative is it? Is it Kentucky spent too much and they suck, or Kentucky spent too much and they've won it, they're going to win a title? I don't know. But what I will tell you is what a blanket statement is. Let's talk about this for a second. There seems to be a lot of discourse online about the players that Kentucky has brought in. Let's take Jalen Lowe, for example. Jalen Lowe was a poor efficiency, high volume offensive engine at Pitt, playing with a broken hand for most of the finger, broken finger on a shooting hand, mind you, on his strong hand. and he was asked to carry the load for that Pitt team. He was asked to do everything for that Pitt team. Kentucky picks up Jalen Lowe. We know the discourse. Hey, this guy could end up being pretty good. He could end up being great as an assist man. Efficiency-wise, can only go up under Pope because he's going to be utilized in a more rigid fashion, one would assume. He's got all these players surrounding him that are going to make him better offensively. There's a much higher floor here, so I think efficiency-wise, he's going to take a jump because of the types of shooting opportunities he's going to get. It's going to be a little bit better. He took so many shots in the mid-range area that just didn't fall last year. I think you're going to see a much different Jalen Lowe this year. It's all pointing towards either marginal improvement for a very solid guard or very good improvement for what could end up being an All-American type guard. And the blanket statement that not just Louisville fans, but most people online that are in an opposing position to Kentucky, they say, well, you think that the ACC is a bad conference, and yet you somehow think that Jalen Lowe is going to be good for you despite playing for a bad ACC team. The conference is bad, so therefore the players are bad. A blanket statement is a broad, sweeping generalization that applies to everyone or everything in a group without exceptions, often based on emotion or bias rather than evidence. It oversimplifies complex issues and can be inaccurate, leading to misunderstandings and unfair judgments. You will see this not just in sports, but in your life. Whether anytime you are in a situation with a friend or a family member or someone you don't even know, and they have a negative disposition towards you, or maybe it's vice versa. Maybe you're the one that's upset with them. Often in those raw moments, you will make a blanket statement, a sweeping generalization about something going on within the argument to make your point. And far too often in our lives, I think unfairly, even in the heated moments, we do this, where we have some sort of sweeping generalization to override their point, and we don't stop to think about the nuance of the situation before opening our mouth. It's something that I struggle with, and I'm sure it's something that a lot of people struggle with, because like the definition here says, it leads to misunderstandings and unfair judgments. It's not fair to people to make some broad sweeping assumption about their life because it's not a fair judgment of it. There's so much nuance and context to everything. Everything requires context. In Jalen Lowe's situation, I think he is a good player in a bad conference. I think there are a lot of really good players to have come out of the ACC this past season. And yet that also still doesn't take away from the fact that it was still overall not a good conference. That's still, I think, majority comprised of bad players. There's so much nuance to this, and a lot of times people don't want to talk about that within their arguments. And so I think in Kentucky's case, I think there's so much positive to point towards when it comes to players like Jalen, Cam Williams. I think in terms of players on the roster, Chandler, Noah. I think that Jelovic is another interesting conversation coming out of Croatia. There's so many different things here that kind of combine to make a good team. And I don't quite understand the narrative that people are trying to spin with this program, with the arguments that are pushing back against it, because they either don't make sense or they lack so much context and they lack thought. And I guess that's what I'm asking for, is for people to kind of think a little bit about what they're saying and whether or not it is wholly true, because we kind of lose the plot here. Anyway, I want to talk a little bit about Kentucky looking to dominate their exhibition game against Purdue. So we've got a player here, coincidentally Jalen Lowe, who is saying that we're going to play to win the game, when we've also got a head coach and Mark Pope that's not saying that. He's not saying we're not going to go out there and we're going to try and lose, but he's definitely saying things that I think would be conducive to a more volatile environment, meaning a volatile game, I would say, meaning I think there's more opportunity to lose if Kentucky's going to attempt to do the things that he claims that they are attempting to do. So no moral victories here, first and foremost, for Kentucky. There's no moral victory in losing to an opponent, generally speaking. However, in this specific instance, in this context-driven instance where you are playing an exhibition game against the number one team in the country, I think that there is an exception to this rule, right? Because it doesn't count. It doesn't matter for anything, unless a player gets hurt, in which case we got some serious issues. But for Matt Painter, for Braden Smith, for Trey Kaufman-Wren, for Oscar Clough, for Jalen Lowe, for Otega Owe, for Jaden Quains, for Jasper John, there is, I think, there can be takeaways here for Mark Pope. There can be takeaways here for these people, regardless of whether or not there's a win or a loss. There can be positive things taken away. Pope and Lowe seem to be saying two different things here, at least a little bit. So here was the quote from Mark Pope during SEC Media Days talking about the Purdue game. He said, "I expect we're going to see things where we shake our heads in disbelief, like, what were we thinking? I think we're going to shake our heads and think that's amazing. I didn't actually expect to see that. We're going to see all kinds of things. The opportunity for us to go against the number one team in the country this early before the season even starts, where we can still experiment and try things and learn things about our team." So highlight the two things there. Him saying, I expect we're going to see things where we shake our heads in disbelief, like, what were we thinking? While also we can still experiment and try things and learn things. This seemingly in contradiction with what Jalen Lowe said, quote, "We're going to learn for sure, but at the end of the day, we're going out there to win. That's the main goal. That's what we expect out of ourselves, and that's what our fans expect out of us. We're going to do nothing less than try to win out there." Nothing less than try to win out there does not sound like we're going to experiment and try some random things and learn things about our team. Experimentation, I don't think, is the same as going out there to try and win the game definitively. Nothing less than try and win, right? It's the specific words here that kind of have me hung up, where Pope is not saying we're going to go out there and lose, but we're going to experiment, and Lowe saying we're not, like, yeah, we're going to learn, but we're going to try and win and do nothing less than that. I don't necessarily know if the two can comfortably go hand in hand, not saying that they can't. It's just in my mind, you can't go out there and say, well, we're going to try some new stuff, just kind of see what sticks on the wall, and say, also, we're going to do nothing less than try and win the game. Because if you're just throwing stuff at a wall and you don't know whether or not it's going to work, doesn't necessarily, go hand in hand with we're doing everything we can to win. If you were trying to do everything you can to win, I think the game plan would look a little bit different. You wouldn't try and experiment. You wouldn't try and provide yourself such a volatile potential outcome. But again, it is also an exhibition game. I don't necessarily think it's the worst thing in the world for Kentucky to go out there and try and experiment and learn things about themselves. In fact, I think that it is what they should be doing. But you can't also say we're going to do nothing less than try and win if you're also just kind of BSing around a little bit. Prepare yourself for a rough game is all I would say. From both sides, actually. Despite the fact that Purdue is so experienced, they are so talented, I would expect kind of what we saw in the Oklahoma State-Auburn game, where I think you might see points scored, but I don't necessarily know if you're going to see an insane shooting performance from either of these teams. So just keep that on the back burner, that we may not see the prettiest game from either squad, and we're going to learn some things. I don't necessarily think this is going to be, hey, we're going out there and we're going to die trying to win this game. This isn't the Final Four. This is an exhibition game. So I think that's kind of the mentality. I think we should have the mentality that Pope has. Doesn't necessarily go in hand with what Lowe is saying, but I don't necessarily think either of them are, it's a negative opinion to have, right? I don't think it's a bad thing. Last thing I want to talk about here is maximizing possessions. Let's talk about this for a little bit here in just a moment. Before we do it, though, tell you guys about our friends over at Wayfair. The holidays are going to be here before you know it, which is pretty exciting, but getting your home ready for guests and celebrations can obviously feel like a lot. Maybe your serveware needs a refresh or the guest room could use new bedding. And Wayfair has everything you need to get your home holiday ready. From Christmas trees and wreaths to bedding, cookware, and outdoor inflatables, it's your one-stop shop for every room in the house. They make it easy to personalize your home for the holidays with a huge selection for every style and budget. And with free and easy delivery, even on the big stuff, you can get everything you need without the hassle of huge delivery fees. Get organized, refreshed, and ready for the holidays with way less. Head to wayfair.com right now to shop all things home. That's WAYFAIR.com. Wayfair, every style, every home. Today's episode is also brought to you by Supply House. When the opening whistle blows on a new repair, get your crew moving forward with Supply House. Order today and see parts on your doorstep tomorrow. Over 280,000 plumbing, HVAC, and electrical items from the most trusted brands in the business. Their real-time inventory and honest lead times keep you from punting projects, while their industry-leading customer service always has your blind side covered. Join the free Trade Master program today and score serious perks like priority shipping, lower prices, and a dedicated support line. Visit supplyhouse.com to sign up for free and use promo code SHCollege5 for 5% off your order. That's supplyhouse.com. Real people, real service. All right, let's wrap up the show today talking a little bit about maximizing possessions. We've talked a lot about the narrative surrounding Kentucky basketball. We've talked a little bit about the game plan against Purdue. Obviously, we will have a crossover episode with Nick, host of Locked On Boilermakers, next week before that game. Really excited about that. But let's talk here briefly about maximizing possessions. This is something else that Pope talked about at SEC Media Days, talking about how he's trying to extend the game on the defensive side while trying to play with more pace offensively. Everything is about gravity, he said. He said he's extremely proud of what the team did shooting the ball last year, but he wants to run it back. He talked a lot about how the pace of play on offense needs to be go as fast as possible. You need to play with as much speed as you possibly can, get as many shots up as you possibly can, whereas on defense, you are trying to slow it down as much as possible. You're trying to maximize possessions for your team. The more opportunities you give yourself to score while taking away opportunities from the opponent, the more likely of a chance you have to win the game, even if you are not shooting at a high clip. If you can combine high efficient shooting with a ton of possessions and you take possessions away from your opponent, you not only have a chance to win the game, you have the chance to blow out every single team that you face, almost regardless of matchup. I've been over this a dozen times this year, but the amount of times that you give yourself the ball, more chances to score, points win the game, pace is crucial. We need to be aware of something this season. Again, I just want to highlight this. This is not the same shooting team that we saw a year ago. I don't think it's a bad shooting team. I don't think it's a below average shooting team. I think it's an average to above average shooting team. And with the way Kentucky is going to try and maximize possessions outside of just shooting, I think you're going to see a more well-rounded product. But I think that shooting is going to take a dip in sacrifice of that. How much of a dip, I'm not sure, because Pope also emphasized, like literally seconds after he talked about possessions, about how impressed he is with the strides that this team has made shooting the ball this offseason. Like they came in, they weren't shooting that great, and then all of a sudden they just have been on fire ever since. Pace is crucial. Maximizing possessions is big. Defensively, the Cats expect them to be better. Shooting might take a dip. Let's just be aware of that. This is not going to be, I think, as flashy of an offensive team as it was a season ago, and that is an okay thing if it means a more well-rounded product and less volatility night in and night out. I think that's a fair trade-off. I want to talk a little bit tomorrow about Josh Irving. An announcement could be coming soon. Talk a little bit more about this Cats team as we get closer to the start of the season. Really excited about it. Thank you guys so much for tuning in today. That's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Kentucky. You can follow the show on Twitter at Locked On UK. Follow me on Twitter at @LanceDawe_. Follow the show over on Instagram. That is at Kentucky Podcast. Any questions, comments, concerns, leave those in the YouTube comments below. Hit me on the socials. I will see you all tomorrow for another episode of Locked On Kentucky. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and God bless.